Hello again, fellow druids. Today's episode, I am going to discuss the concept of playstyle. There are a few, so there's a few, this can go a lot of different ways, so let me try to frame this conversation. We'll see how my rambling goes, but this might be one of the shorter episodes, but a lot of people, you'll hear use the term like, well, that's just not my playstyle, or sometimes they'll talk about a caster like, well, that's their playstyle. And I want to talk about, and I think there's a lot of different ways that this is true for a lot of different people at a lot of different times, but people will talk about a list or a caster and say, that's totally my playstyle or that's not my playstyle. And some people, and I think for some people that's true, but I think it is true only to an extent. A lot of people use that phrase, and they're not totally wrong. I'm not here trying to imagine. Sorry, team. I'm thirsty. I'm not here to say that I think. Better. That I think they are crazy, right? But what I want to do is evolve that conversation forward. So, what many other players who have reached the top, and if not necessarily all of them, there's identifying it's playstyle to me comes down to you deciding what playstyle you want to play, and that's an important distinction, right? And keep in mind, this is a game. We're here to have fun, right? So if you like playing in a certain way, then by all means do it, right? Especially if you can do it and feel like you're having the amount of success that you need to have. To give a couple, so to elaborate a little bit more, what I mean by that is, some casters are going to play a very bricky style. Some are going to play a very support caster style. Some, and sometimes it's not the caster. Sometimes the list will change this too. Some casters are very toolbox. Some casters are very aggressive on their own. Some casters are very brick oriented, and some casters are very defensive oriented. It's sort of a brick still. Some are very assassination threat. Some have a lot of control over the game, right? There's a lot of different styles that casters can take, and then there's a lot of different ways to build lists to associate, either to make that strength of that caster stronger, or to take a caster that does that and add another one of those dimensions to them, or whatever. And a lot of times people will say things like, well, my play style is this. And I would challenge you to say, and I'm trying to challenge myself a little bit. If you watch my last video, I talk about Baldur 2. And that's kind of what spurred this idea to talk about. One of the reasons I want to play Baldur 2 is I want to evolve my way of thinking about the game. I do usually choose play styles that are a little bit more aggressive or a little bit more controlling or centered on scenario. And that doesn't mean those lessons won't be applied somewhat to what Baldur plays, right? He wants scenario. You need points to win. But a lot of the games I would play, like, I would say at my last, probably all of Mark III's worth of tournaments, and probably even practice games, I've ended the game. If the game went to turn 5, it was pretty rare. I would say most of the games I've either won or lost by the end of turn 4, or sooner. I've definitely won sooner, but most of my games are ending around there. And that in general is not the only play style of the game, right? That's just what I've been playing, either with Kruger, more recently with Kruger 2, who is able to control the flow of the game, control the scenario, he's got a lot of movement and whatnot. Or Uno, who's able to really just aggressively take table, hit and run a little bit, and get a strong alpha. And both with a decently strong assassination game plan. But in some cases, there's factions who completely don't even play that as their primary play style. And Circle, that tends to be more of their primary play style, but it doesn't always have to be, right? Baldur, really both of them are not playing to that type of play style. And there's some others, but he's the primary one. And so I'm testing that out so that I can evolve and start looking at other playstyles, right? Where most of the casters I just talked about, they want to engage with you or they want to control you. Baldur, really either Baldur to a degree, are a little bit more catcher's mitt style casters where I know the enemy is coming into me. I'm almost certainly not going to get the alpha, so how am I going to play that, right? And this is where they start bouncing out things like Wold Watchers, Wold Wraths, Megalith, Wold Guardians, Rock Walls, and things like that. Yeah. So, but so then when you say playstyle, what do you mean? You know, what? Well, but I always play the same way. And I just want to. The point of this video is to recognize that it's a choice. You're choosing to play that way. And if you want to expand how you play, you may want to break out of that bubble, or you may want to recognize that that is how you're playing, so that you sort of know like how much practice you have with a certain style. And I just want to give two examples. So because the thing is, a lot of people are like, oh well, I play Circle. I don't play that play style, right? Or I do play this certain play style. But even if you cross multiple factions, I used to play a friend of mine here locally. He's not really playing as much right now due to stuff, but he owned at one point basically everything in the game. He had at least one of everything. Sometimes he had so many of everything he could have fielded 2 armies at the same time. So he could play any given night. He could play any list he wanted. And almost certainly, and this was not always true, but almost certainly the style of lists he would bring were all very similar. They were all very aggressive but tanky lists played by what was mostly a support caster. In almost every faction, he played a list like that. He was kind of an old Khador player. He played like Butcher 1, but he played him way back and safe, and then only really put him in if he had to. He played for attrition almost every time. And that play style was always the one he preferred to play, and it kept working for him, so he kept doing it. And then, you know, every time he'd sort of be like, well, I want to try out a new list. It would really be very similar play style, right? He'd have a caster that was kind of tanky, not super tanky, could support really well, generally wasn't playing for scenario, and whatnot, and it worked out for him. So, counterpoint, a fellow who actually worked for Privateer Press named Will Pagani, when he was playing, used to play Circle and was very known for playing Kruger. So you played Kruger too, but very known for Chromac 1, who was very hit and run, very anti-spell, lots of movement, lots of assassination vectors, and eventually he actually talked about this subject quite a bit. He branched away from that, and he was one that said, you don't have a play style. You play it like a list needs a play style, and a list plays a play style, but you need to change to accommodate it, right? And then he played Khador, and he'd play like Vlad, who had to sit back and shoot and be very supporty, or he'd play Butcher 3, who could be up in your face, and played very differently than some of those. Trying to think, when he went to Retribution, he was playing Viros 2, who was a very different approach again. And there's other things he's played, I know, that he approaches differently, and it's his theory was, I'm going to look at the strength I need and then play to that style. So that's another way you approach it. Anyways, a lot of this is actually just a little bit rambly on my part, but I wanted to get it out there and just talk about how playstyle is what you decide you want playstyle to be. The playstyles are there. You only have the one that you choose, or ones you choose. And so knowing more of them could be valuable to you, or knowing that you excel at one of them and looking for that as you switch to a new caster, a new list, a new way to play. Or if that's currently not a strength in the tournament scene, you may want to recognize that as well. Anyways, this was just a short video meant to sort of highlight a thought that I'd had. If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, share us on social media, join in the conversation on Discord, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you find me. And we'll see you next time.